This video is sponsored by PCBWAY. They offer a variety of PCB services ranging from standard PCB to rigid flex. Simply upload your Gerber files for a quick build time and amazing quality PCBs. In addition to PCBs, they also offer CNC, injection molding, and 3D printing services, which I'll definitely be using in the future. Definitely check out their website, and thank you so much PCBWAY for sponsoring my channel. Today we have an Xbox Series S in for repair due to a broken HDMI port. If you look closely, you might see a broken trace or two, but a lot of the prep work, such as exposing the traces, has been done for us due to a previous repair attempt, so this should be pretty quick. Let's start by repairing the broken ground traces first. All I'm doing here is adding flux and more solder to the exposed copper on the PCB, that way I have a place to attach some very fine wire to. With the wires soldered into place, I can now go ahead and bend them into shape and cut off the excess. Now it's time to focus on the rest of the traces. First, I'm going to go ahead and retin the exposed copper with some more solder. Just like the ground traces, only a lot thinner, I'm now going to go ahead and solder a very fine piece of wire on top of that exposed trace. Now we're just going to bend those wires so that they're resting in the middle of the vacant pad and cut them to length. Now you can see just how small those wires are in comparison to my giant fat thumb here. We're just going to place the replacement connector on top and make sure that all of the wires are underneath the pin that they're supposed to go to. I'm going to go ahead and tack just 2 of the anchor points down so that way it doesn't move while we solder. After all the pins are aligned with the wire that they should go to, I'm going to go ahead and load this thing up with some flux and start soldering. The lesson here is that less is more. You want a very small amount of solder to touch the pin and the wire underneath it. In order to achieve that small flow of solder, I'm using a modified version of the drag technique. Instead, I'm not dragging, I'm just touching it one at a time with a small amount of solder on the tip. The solder will flow from the tip into the pin and the wire and create a very small solder joint, which is what we want. That big blob of solder you see on my tip here is not being used to flow into the joint, I'm just using it to store solder that I don't want flowing into the joint. And if we look at it from this angle, you can see that there's a nice small fillet of solder going from the pin to the wire underneath. So now we can go ahead and solder the anchor points for the HDMI port to really solidify this repair. To finish off the repair, I'm going to go ahead and cover the exposed wires and copper with some conformal coating. I prefer this stuff over solder mask because it dries really hard and doesn't look too out of place. And now it's time for the moment of truth. I have the unit somewhat closed up, so I'm going to go ahead and push the power button. We got the fan spinning, we got the noise, but do we have video signal? And there we go, just like that, this Xbox is repaired. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. For those wondering, I did replace the thermal paste on the CPU. I didn't film that part because this was more focused on the repair aspect and not the assembly, which you can see from other YouTubers. I also let the unit run for about 2 hours and played Forza intermittently just to make sure that nothing overheated and that the repair was stable.